Our next speaker is Sarah Mills. I am happy to introduce her. She has she will be talking about here come the 1,200 acre solar farms. Should we celebrate or worry? Sarah is from the School for Environment and Sustainability and the Graham Sustainability Institute, and her favorite food is roasted parsnips. Sarah?
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. Let me find my mouse. All right. So between the time that I proposed the title for the talk and tonight, Crane's Detroit Business came out with this story, and they interviewed the state's two largest utilities, confirming that in order to meet their existing decarbonization plans, the utilities are expecting to need to put solar panels on about 100,000 acres of land. And that's just in the state of Michigan. The story notes that while there could be opportunities for solar on brownfields or on rooftops, the cheapest and most expedient option is to use farmland. I got to admit that as a scholar of farmland preservation, I'm really conflicted about this. And I'm not the only one. The Washington Post here, in stories just a couple weeks apart, acknowledges that some folks think of solar as a threat to farmland, but it also presents a new opportunity as a way to diversify farm incomes. And I want to be really clear that this conflict isn't over agrivoltaics. That is when you design a site with both farming and energy production in mind. There's not that conflict there. There's research underway on agrivoltaics, and I'm hoping that we're going to see more of it here, hopefully even on campus. But the reality is that in the very short term or even kind of medium near term, that's not really what's on the table. Instead, the solar farms that are being proposed in Michigan and really across the Midwest are designed as predominantly energy production sites, and they span hundreds of acres. I pulled a couple of nearby pictures out of this, but there, in addition to these pictures, Michigan has one solar farm that's about an hour north of here in Shiawassee County. That's 1,900 acres. They don't have great pictures of it, aerial pictures. You can't get that whole thing in a photo yet. That project involves a couple dozen landowners, and it constitutes really a significant economic development in the community. A question that often arises in the discussion of solar, particularly in the Midwest, is whether solar development in this form is something that complements or conflicts with farmland preservation goals. I want to acknowledge that farmland preservation has many meanings. These are just a few of them, and many goals behind it. It can be to preserve an urban boundary or a rural vista. It can mean preserving habitat or green space, or physically preserving land for growing food. And solar interacts differently with each of these goals. And I could talk to you for hours about how energy development fit with them. But I just want to spend the next 2 minutes talking about this last one, which is preserving farm livelihoods, because I think that that's really where the jury is still out on how solar interacts. So on the one hand, solar is undoubtedly a good economic proposition for those farmland owners who choose to host solar panels on their property. They can often make really good money by leasing their land to a solar developer. The going rate in Michigan is about $1,000 per acre per year. And to be clear, these farmland owners aren't forced to take on a solar development. They have to willingly sign a lease. But the question on farm livelihoods is also about whether these large solar projects have negative impacts on the farming economy that's in that area. We know that if a solar farm takes up 1,200 acres, the grain elevator is going to be processing less grain, and implement dealers are going to be selling fractionally fewer tractors. But what we don't know is if these losses are offset by the solar industry. In most places, solar developers are paying more in property taxes to the local government than what farming activity pays. And again, those landowners are receiving lease revenue. But whether that's an overall good for the economy depends on how and where those leaseholders are spending that revenue. And this summer, thanks to some funding from the Department of Energy, I'm doing interviews with solar leaseholders across the Midwest to understand how they're using that revenue. Are they reinvesting it in their farm? My previous research on wind energy finds that landowners who have wind turbines on their property do that. Or are they instead using solar development as a retirement strategy and taking their money with them, perhaps out of state to Florida or Arizona? That's important because it impacts how this revenue recirculates in the economy. And this project will also begin to understand whether or not the land is leased or purchased outright by solar developers, as is increasingly the case. So to sum it up, is solar a new threat or opportunity for rural communities? I think the jury's still out. I really welcome your questions and feedback on it. I'm sadly going to need to leave before the end of the event, but I've included my email address here, so please email me if I don't get to your question in the Q&A before I leave. Thanks.